Welcome to Western Technical College Business and Industry Services. This video, along with other training opportunities from Western BIS, are designed to help employees stay informed on the latest trends in today's changing workplace. To learn how Western can support your business, visit us at westerntc.edu/BIS.
We're going to get going here. First and foremost, what I'd like you to do is shut your eyes, think back and remember the worst presentation, big or small, doesn't matter, that you personally attended. I'm guessing it doesn't take you long to think of that one. Now, if you could, either remember in your head or write down quickly, write down the things that made it the worst presentation. Now, when you think of that worst presentation, I'm guessing that perhaps it had something to do with something like this, right? A typical slide. I mean, can you picture the presenter literally reading this slide word for godforsaken word? Now, we can talk for a long time about the visual design weakness and the user experience listening to that presenter, but let's look at it from kind of a brain science perspective really quickly. The problem with this type of slide and presentation and the type of these presentations, it's called the redundancy effect. Your brain cannot process reading and listening at the same time. In fact, people read faster than they hear, about 275 words per minute versus 150 words per minute. Or maybe the worst presentation you've been to included so many bullet points that you felt like you were in front of a firing squad. Again, the brain science behind why this is so detrimental to a successful presentation, it's because our working memory has its limits. At best, we can hold about 7 pieces of information for less than 30 seconds. You know what? Or maybe the presenter wanted to provide some data to back up what they were talking about. And the data table gave you a headache and the graph gave you vertigo. Now, all of these types of slides have led to advice in countless articles from presentation gurus everywhere. Advice such as like the 10-20-30 rule. So that's 10 slides, less than 20 minutes, at least a 30-point font. Or maybe the 5-5-5 rule, no more than 5 words per line, 5 lines of text per slide, and no more than 5 text-heavy slides in a row. Or even the 1-6-6 rule, 1 main idea, no more than 6 bullet points, no more than 6 words per point. Now, while these and many other simple tricks can help, this is nothing more than trying to chew bubble gum to solve an algebra problem. They do not address the fundamental issues that just make your slides into a presentation that sucks just a little bit less. Our actual real problem is, let's face it, our presentations are broken. In fact, I'd argue that we've just come to accept broken presentations as the norm. Worse yet, we even continue to replicate these mediocre presentations, the subpar speeches, even these lifeless lectures. Now, given the current state of most presentation, at best, the audience leaves with some information they wrote down, most likely never looking at again, or at worst, the audience feels really upset and feels like this was just a complete waste of their time. So why are our current ways of delivering broken? Perhaps we need to look at things a little bit differently. For starters, one of, if not the most important, what is, in your mind, what is one of, if not the most important thing we need to worry about? That's a facetious question. But what I'm going to suggest is that it's attention. Without our audience's attention, nothing else matters. In fact, attention is obviously a very important ingredient for effective advertising, especially in the digital world we live in. So Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella talks about our attention and the valuable commodity that it actually is. This particular quote is part of an infamous Microsoft marketing research report suggesting our digital lifestyle is decreasing the ability for prolonged focus and thus increasing our appetite for more stimuli. In fact, this report suggested that the average attention span in 2000 was 12 seconds. By 2015, it had fallen to 8.25 seconds. Oh, and by the way, the average goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. While this research has often been cited out of context and disputed in numerous studies, especially the 9-second goldfish rule, it does illustrate that in our multi-screen digital world filled with persistent barrage of emails, text, IMs, DMs, the influence of Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, the countless conference calls, the Zoom meetings, the team meetings, the webinars and seminars, all do affect our ability to focus. All of this constant noise and static makes it seemingly impossible to get your message across to the right people at the right time. I firmly believe that the ability to present your ideas in a clear and compelling term is one of the most important skills in the workplace, regardless of industry. Doing this can help you win business with customers, sway skeptical colleagues, get approval for ideas, programs, budgets, nail a job interview, rally a team, and actually so much more. But if we better understand the science behind our actions and apply those concepts in an artful manner, unquestionably our presentations can be better. And quite frankly, you can create them. So let's take a look at our brains, just a really quick moment here. So there's research from a developmental molecular biologist and author and professor, Dr. John Medina. And in his books, he's got a few of them now, but he describes, this is his first one, he describes 12 brain rules. What he does is he presents the science, introduces the research behind it, and then offers ideas on how to apply these in our daily lives, especially at work and school. The simple rules range from survival, that the human brain has evolved, or wiring. Every brain is wired differently. But one particular brain rule is important to what we're discussing today, and it's brain rule number 4. It's called attention. And what he talks about is we don't pay attention to boring things. I want to restate that. We don't pay attention to boring things. In fact, he further states that you've got just seconds to grab someone's attention and only about 10 minutes to keep it. In fact, at 9 minutes and 59 seconds, you must do something to regain attention and restart the clock. That something has to be emotional and relevant. Actually, I do like the way that Jerry Seinfeld describes this as well. And so while there's a multitude of other studies and research on how our brains work, in the end, how do we use that information to create and deliver better presentations that spark the flame of your idea into inspiration and action? Ultimately, how do we create better presentations? For a start, we have to admit that our presentations are actually broken, that they can be better, but we do need to shift our mindset about what presenting actually is. The reality is it has become a common business practice to write presentations as though we were writing a report. Now, let me be perfectly clear. Presentations are not reports. I want to repeat that again. Presentations are not reports. So Mitch Joel is an author, journalist, and president of Twist Image, a digital marketing agency, and he's a keynote speaker throughout the country. In a recent blog post entitled "PowerPoints Don't Suck, You Do," he went through and listed this. Your presentation is not your slides, nor is it your technology. It's not even the words or images on a screen. Your presentation is your ability to distill the information between your ears into a format that tells a simple, educational, and entertaining story to your audience. A simple, educational, and entertaining story. To make your presentation memorable, to inspire your audience, to instill action in your team, or to gain support in the boardroom, tell a story. Information, data, and facts can move your mind, but it has to be blended with emotion to spark our hearts, to make us willing to adopt new ideas or new mindsets. Nancy Duarte is a presentation guru. Her company, Duarte Incorporated, she's written numerous books that I'll actually share with you later on. But according to Nancy, stories are the most powerful delivery tool for information, more powerful and enduring than any other art form. Now, I'm sure you've seen some great presentations and presenters that often use personal stories to engage their audience. Steve Jobs, for instance, was a world-class storyteller. Or locally, if you've been lucky enough to see Tom Thibodeau from Viterbo, or maybe John McHugh from QuickTrip, they are absolutely masterful storytellers. They weave personal stories into larger lessons that, as an audience, we can all relate to. But frankly, if you do any internet search about presentation ideas, you're going to find a plethora of information about storytelling being the new way to engage audiences. Now, I can imagine many of you are thinking, storytelling, I am horrible at telling stories, or my life isn't exciting enough to be able to make an appealing story, or even, I can't tell stories about my life, that's way too personal. Or maybe you're thinking the information that I have to present cannot be told in a story. It's way too complex or way too important for me to stoop to that that level. Or even the audience I'm presenting to, that audience, that's a tough audience. They need hard facts to believe me. And to tell it in a story, are you kidding me? That there's no way they're going to believe me. All right. So before you leave this presentation, I don't mean you need to be a great storyteller, but it's not what the stories are about, nor actually your ability in telling them that I want to focus on. I do want to share why stories are as powerful as they are. So let's go back to looking at the brain again really quickly. So with around 100 billion neurons and almost a quadrillion connections between those neurons, our brains are an extraordinarily complex organism. Yet it's still a pattern-seeking instrument that always looks for some kind of recognizable order. So stories represent our most powerful and meaningful way of doing just that. And let's be honest, since nearly the dawn of time, our earliest ancestors used to sit around the campfire telling stories to explain different aspects of daily occurrences or even the meaning of life. These were often passed down from illiterate generation to illiterate generation. The stories mattered. Now, let me suggest that all of the stories we know really consist of three basic elements. First and foremost, there's the words, right? The phrases and terminology you use to convey the message. There's the visuals, the image you show, or perhaps the images you create in the mind's eye of your audience. And finally, there's the structure, the consistent and captivating arc that provides creative organization for the author and gives the audience the patterns they require to stay engaged. While the words and vocabulary are important, don't get me wrong, that you have to be articulate enough to get your point across, but they're going to be distinct depending on the content and the type of audience. Visuals are a really complex aspect and we go much deeper than we have time for today. Cam or Angie, perhaps that's a future Tuesday session or two to talk about some visuals. The area that I believe will help switch our mindset about presentation is structure. Now, there are a multitude of story structures. If you've ever taken a creative writing course or anything in that nature, you're going to know a bunch of them. But I just want to focus on a few that I think are relevant to what we're doing today. The very first one, and perhaps it's the best well known, is actually Aristotle's three-act structure. Right? It's prologue, episode, exodus, beginning, middle, end. The first act, it sets up the characters and their relationships and the world they live in. Typically, sometime late in the first act, there's an inciting incident where the main character's life will never be the same again. The second act depicts the main character's attempts to resolve some sort of situation, usually without any success, as they've not yet acquired the skills nor learned the lessons necessary to overcome those situations. Often the use of a plot twist takes advantage of our brain's natural tendencies to anticipate what's coming next and then add a little surprise to that story. And then the third act presents the final resolution and of the story and where the main characters will never be the same again. Another one, Joseph Campbell took the three-act structure and then superimposed another very interesting structure on it. It's called the hero's journey. These are kind of mythological narratives, and he refers to this structure as kind of a monomyth. Now, Campbell has laid out 17 different stages in this structure, but not all stories use all 17, nor will they use them in the same order. I'm not going to go through all 17 here, but I am going to just go through 12 of them fairly quickly. So the hero's journey starts out in the ordinary world. The world contains ordinary characters going about an ordinary life. Think like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But then something calls them away from the world, a threat or a quest, a call to adventure. Think Frodo in Lord of the Rings. Now that hero may refuse that call because they feel like they're unprepared or maybe they're afraid. Think like Sarah Connor in the Terminator. Typically then a helper appears to guide and assist. They meet the mentor. Think Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back. And although reluctant, the hero is compelled to accept the quest and crosses the threshold. Think Neo in the Matrix when he's asking the red or the blue pill. After crossing over, the hero defines their relationship with other characters through test, allies, and enemies. Think like Simba in The Lion King. Now, setbacks occur, and the hero must adapt and change their approach. Think Rocky Balboa in Rocky. Eventually, the hero experiences a major hurdle and faces their own weakness in the ordeal stage. Think like Stitch in Lilo and Stitch. After surviving, the hero accomplishes their goal and receives their reward. Think Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. The road back sees the hero journey back to the ordinary world, but knows that they are now different. Think the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. Then the hero may face a final test where they use everything they've learned and are resurrected. Think Beowulf as he fights the dragon and defends his kingdom. At the end, the hero returns with the elixir and applies that help to all that remain. Think George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. Now, this is a powerful narrative used throughout literature, throughout Hollywood. Disney leverages this in so many different movies. It's hard not to use those on every single one. A quick side note about this story structure, though. When I'm thinking about this from a presentation frame, if you're the presenter, you set your audience up to think of themselves as the hero, and you as the presenter are the mentor. Just something to kind of keep in mind as we move forward. While the other two structures are customarily used in fiction, the last structure I want to introduce is one that Nancy Duarte developed to analyze and build presentations. She called it a spark line. Now, this structure creates power by adding the concept of tension and release. And the way that we kind of do this is we're going to switch back between what currently is and what could be. And we do this throughout. So what is to what could be. Identifying that there's a gap between what is and what could be. That's what we need to traverse. That's what we need our audience to kind of figure out how we go from what is to what could be by using your ideas. This is what is able to keep the audience engaged because of this tension. Our brains continue to work through how to bridge that gap. This tension continues between our current reality and our future aspirations until the end, where you describe how implementing what you are presenting can lead to a new and better norm. If we add in a call to adventure in the beginning to help inspire your audience to join you, and a call to action towards the end provides opportunities to actively enlist your audience on your now, on your journey, but quite frankly, it's now going to be their journey. You have the gist of what's going to prepare you for a great presentation. I want to share this next one because this is how I've actually prepared today's presentation. Now, again, obviously there are a multitude of other story arcs. These are the three that resonate with me, and this is how I even set up this presentation. Truth be told, designing like this is both a forward and a backward design at the same time. So when I think about these things, I try to think about the end, but I'm thinking about the beginning and in the middle and kind of working through those at the same time. But the 3-act structure is at the foundation. The hero's journey is overlaid, and the spark line is the tension that I try to create. On a side note about that hero's journey, again, at the heart of every good story, your audience is the actual hero. I have 2 grandchildren, Silas and Quentin, almost 5 and 3, and their favorite bedtime stories don't come from a book. It's not when I'm reading them a book. It's when we're creating a story ourselves, and they're at the center. They're the ones that are the heroes, and they actually help make the story their own. So think of how you would create a presentation. Let me rephrase that. Think of how you would create a presentation if you could only be part of the story as an ally or a helper, not the hero. What this journey prods us to remember is that it's the audience who plays the hero. Now, I can imagine many of you are thinking, I don't have the time to do that for every presentation. I'm not going to deny that this type of process does take more time. All things of value do take more time. But how do you put a value on getting others to not only understand your ideas, but be willing to implement them? And quite frankly, if you don't have time to create something your audience can remember and engage in, perhaps the ideas that you're trying to get across aren't worth their time in the first place. So this does take time. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And Lao Tzu, the ancient father of Taoism, basically said, time's a created thing. If I say I don't have time, it's like saying I don't want to. Again, if this is true, think of the time the audience has invested in listening to you. Again, based on that Microsoft research report, their attention or their time is the most valuable and influential thing they own. There are no easy fixes. You can continue to use methods that are ineffectual. You can choose to make the time, or you can choose to make the time to do better. I believe your next audience, no matter the size, deserves that. So I hope you can begin to commit to creating better presentations in the future. You can begin by recognizing that your presentation is not your slides, and your slide deck itself, when you're crafting your next presentation, remember, your slide deck it should not be a teleprompter so you can remember what you wanted to say. It's a bit of a cliche here, but amateurs practice until they get it right. Professionals practice until they cannot get it wrong. All of your presentations will take practice. To think that you're going to be able to put some information up on the screen and read it so that your audience then understands it is doing no benefit to you and is actually doing no benefit for your audience. Also, your slide deck, the slides you create, it's not a handout. How many times have you been in a situation, a presentation, a board meeting, whatever it might be, and somebody's going to say, well, can I get a copy of your slides? So if what you're doing is if what you can do is give your slides to somebody and they can understand everything that you wanted to present, that's not a presentation, that's a report. Once again, a presentation is not a report. Another thing that it's not a data dump. Your audience is never going to understand all the data the same way that you do. Even the most intelligent audience is never going to understand the data the same way you do. You need to analyze it first and only present what's truly necessary. And if you can do so in a very graphic, visual way, it's even better. Now, your presentations should include using the framework behind good storytelling, right? The 3-act structure, the hero's journey, that spark line, right? You should be able to craft the beginning of your story by describing life as the audience knows it. Actually, I wish I could see many of you. I was hoping most of you would be able to nod your heads as we were talking about how poor or how bad some of the presentations you sat through are, because you recognize it, right? That I was articulating what you've already understood. You need to develop that middle of the presentation, right? So now that people realize that the world is a little bit off kilter, keep playing up with that contrast between what is and what could be if they implement your idea. And finally, kind of make that ending powerful. Describe how that new bliss is going to be so much better when they adopt your ideas. So as we go through this, the better you can provide that story and provide that structure, your ideas get implemented, your ideas provide action. And quite frankly, in this day and age, the diverse ideas that we need are coming from you, right? You need to get your ideas across to more people so that they understand it and they can implement what you think is right. In the end, though, you need to remember that the audience is the hero and you are nothing more than the mentor Yoda to Luke. All right. So as we come close to our end here, I might suggest moving forward, you are on a journey of your own. A bit of a hero's journey, I guess. And you've been operating in the ordinary world, probably writing reports instead of storytelling to present your ideas. Now, you may accept my call to begin tomorrow to craft better presentations, but maybe you'll refuse it. I hope that what I've introduced is a better way, maybe piqued your interest, maybe given you a different perspective on how to craft those presentations. But welcome to the threshold of a new way of presenting. You have a tremendous opportunity in front of you, and no doubt there will be a learning curve to incorporate the things we've talked about. You're going to come across a variety of tests. You're going to find some allies and maybe even some enemies. I'm sure as you modify your approach and deliver a few presentations, incorporating what we've talked about, you're going to find the process that works for you. Your reward will be fruitful, and hopefully you will never stop learning better methods of engaging your audience. In that vein, here are some further resources that might be helpful. And quite frankly, all of these literally changed my life. First and foremost, Nancy Duarte is a complete inspiration. Her books provide guidance on a variety of aspects in presentations and leadership. The first one is Slideology. Its presentations require you to think visually, and visual expression is neither easy nor natural. And quite frankly, it's not taught very often. Resonate. A lot of what we've talked about today comes from that book, Resonate. Resonate is both a book, and actually if you internet search Nancy Duarte Resonate, there is actually a multimedia version of that is a great interactive book. It's free. All you need to do is sign up for her newsletter. Gar Reynolds is a master, and Presentation Zen is almost like a Bible for presentations. The general mission of Presentation Zen is pretty simple. It's to rid the world of bad PowerPoint, and bad goes beyond aesthetics. And the final book is Dan Rome's Show and Tell. Rome says there are 3 rules to follow in any meaningful presentation: tell the truth, tell it with a story, and tell the story with pictures. Like I said, all of these books have really made an impact in both my life and how I think about presentations. But in the end, my name is Michael Pellinger. I've been a lifelong resident of the Coulee region. I've held numerous jobs and even switched careers a couple of times. I love attending presentations that inspire people to do great things that they may never have thought about doing without participating. I also love helping people. I may not be an expert at any one thing, but I feel like I have a pretty diverse experience and skill set. Plus, I'll always be willing to help people create presentations that are much better than what they've been. So that kind of concludes my presentation.
Thank you for viewing this video from Western Technical College Business and Industry Services. Learn more about the hundreds of training and development opportunities available for your employees at westerntc.edu/BIS.